Welcome back. Democrats in Maryland ready for a gerrymandering fight, hoping to fast-track a new state map of its 8 U.S. House districts. One Maryland Democrat planning legislation which would require a redraw of the congressional map if another state does the same mid-decade. Of course, this after the Texas fight is underway. The redistricting fight thrust into the spotlight this week. State House Democrats fled the state because they didn't want to vote on it. Now they must return to the Lone Star State today or face consequences. 50 of them left Austin on Monday to boycott the redistricting vote. The president is calling on the Commerce Department, meanwhile, to begin work on a new census. Writing on Truth Social, a new census will be based on modern-day facts and figures, and importantly, using the results and information gained from the presidential election of 2024. People who are in our country illegally will not be counted in the census, writes President Trump. Joining me now is Maryland Congressman Andy Harris. He's the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. Mr. Chairman, your reaction, and what do you expect to take place in Maryland?
Well, first of all, my reaction to the president's new census is great. Let's do it, because a mid-decade census would lead to a different sharing of resources from the federal government and not rewarding states that allow a large number of illegal aliens. With regards to Maryland, look, they tried to do this in 2022. They tried to redistrict me out of my seat then. We went to court. We prevailed, and the maps were not allowed to be that partisan. If they try it again, they could end up losing and actually gain more Republican seats in Maryland, which used to have 4 Republicans. Now it only has 1. The bottom line is they're going to roll. If they want to roll the dice, let them roll it. But the courts have already ruled in Maryland you can't have an extreme partisan gerrymander under our current Constitution.
I mean, you look at a state like Massachusetts. Are there any Republicans there? I mean, in terms of the districting, how do these seats get decided? I mean, for example, Massachusetts, what's the story there?
Well, there are no Republicans in Massachusetts,
right.
even though Western
possible?
Massachusetts. Well, they gerrymander that rural Western Massachusetts over into the populated eastern part of the state, just like they did in the Western Maryland district. They drew it into suburban Washington in order to eliminate the the second Republican we used to have out there. That's what they do. They'll draw rural districts into urban districts in order to dilute the voters, the suburban and rural voters.
That's incredible. Senate Democrats have introduced legislation to reverse what they're calling devastating health care cuts. Meanwhile, in the big, beautiful bill, the Protecting Healthcare and Lowering Costs Act, sir, is led by Oregon Senator Ron Wyden. He's aiming to reverse all the health care cuts in the mega bill. Your thoughts, Mr. Chairman?
Well, first of all, there aren't really any cuts in that bill. Medicaid is going to increase 26%. The spending on Medicaid is still going to increase 26% over the next 10 years. We're just slowing the growth by eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. We're asking able-bodied people to actually work in order to get that incredibly lucrative benefit of Medicaid. Again, that's to me, that's eliminating abuse of the program. That is not a cut. And again, overall spending is going to go up 26% in Medicaid over the next 10 years.
So, I mean, it's just, rewriting history here and telling us what's not in the bill is in the bill.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Again, look, they make it up. Why would you would want to defend able-bodied people from staying at home, not working, and receiving a benefit that's worth at least $10,000 in the state of Maryland is just unclear to me.
Let me move on to what happened yesterday because, Mr. Chairman, former Biden advisor Anita Dunn testified over the mental decline of her former boss. She claims that the former president made all the important decisions during his presidency. But when pressed by reporters, she refused to answer. Watch this.
Do you think the president was fit to serve for another 4 years? Are you disloyal to the Biden family? Ms. Dunn, why should voters trust Democrats in the White House again?
Ms. Dunn, how was the meeting overall today?
Do you think President Biden was fit to be president, Ms. Dunn?
Yes or no?
Just
give us a yes or no.
A source telling Fox News that Dunn revealed why Biden notoriously blew off an interview during the Super Bowl last year. The source said that Ms. Dunn confirmed President Biden's team did not do the Super Bowl interview because of information contained in the Her report. They thought the main coverage would be about what he did with classified records and not about the president's policy decisions, Mr. Chairman. Or maybe they thought that the Her report would expose Biden's mental challenges, more specifically.
Well, I will tell you, Maria, you didn't need the Her report to
I know.
expose it. Every American eyes who saw him function, or I should say not function, understood that he was not fit to be president, certainly not for another 4 years.
And what is the, end of this? I mean, what are the solutions here? You know, we're waiting on some accountability, Congressman. Who was running the country in the last 4 years? We know that the auto pen was used by his aides. Was he aware of the decisions? Was he aware of the pardons that were made by the auto pen, policy being shaped by the auto pen?
Again, I think most Americans have figured out that he probably wasn't aware of a lot of things he were doing, that it was run by an internal cabal in the White House. And Americans are just relieved that we now have a president who actually can function, who actually can think, who actually can speak for himself and make decisions. So I think Americans have mostly moved on past the Biden presidency. But I think they're going to pay attention to the mental acuity of anyone who asks to be the commander-in-chief of the United States in the future.
Real quick before you go, do you have any expectations of what happens when you come back from recess? What will you have, 14 legislative days left in the month of September? You're going to have to deal with Democrats to fund the government. What are your expectations?
Well, the expectations are whether or not Chuck Schumer wants to shut down the government on September 30th. It'll be a different shutdown because obviously the president is not going to weaponize this shutdown. He's going to keep most government functions open. But it's going to be up to Chuck Schumer whether or not we actually have real negotiations in September about keeping the government open.
All right. We will be watching that. Congressman, good to see you this morning. Thank you, sir. Andy Harris joining us.
Thank you.